Hey gang, it's 2023. We just wrapped up the second season of Gameplay Fowl, so we thought this would be a great opportunity to do an updated game room tour.
There is no we in these decisions. This was all his idea.
Anyway, we've made significant changes to the game room, plus kinda forgot to include, a lot in previous game room tours, so...
When your roommate has ADHD.
There's something different about you.
No, I still think you're a nostalgia-obsessed, attention-deficient man-child.
Let's just get into it. Alright, so to kick things off, first up, we've got the Nintendo wall. Now we call it that because despite there being some loose Sega Genesis games, some PS1 overflow, and the whole Xbox section here behind me, this is where we keep all of our Nintendo games. That's NES, SNES, N64, GameCube, Wii, Switch, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, DS, 3DS. All of our Nintendo games are here on this wall. That's why up top here, you'll also notice that all of the artwork and collectibles is also Nintendo themed. And mostly Legend of Zelda. But we got a lot of games to cover, so let's get right into it. First up, we've got the NES collection. Now this is a combination of my actual games from when I was a kid, along with some games that I purchased more recently to build up my collection. But the overwhelming number of games in the NES collection were actually gifted to me. When I moved into my last apartment, my partner and I had these two neighbors that lived beneath us, and they were super friendly. And on our first day moving in, they came up and the husband just offered me a ton of collectibles as a housewarming gift. He was like, I got all these horror collectibles and all this Lord of the Rings stuff and a bunch of NES games. I don't have any use for them anymore. Would you like them? And I was like, hell yeah, man, I'll take those off your hands. Most of the games that you see here in the NES collection all came from that. And shockingly, my top loader NES was also part of that. So he's actually what got the ball rolling for me on this whole collecting thing. Now, I had owned a bunch of games at one point, sold them all off, and then this dude comes along and is like, here you go. Get your collection going again. But down beneath that, we've got the SNES collection. Now, I'm a little bit embarrassed by this one because I don't have even close to all the Super Nintendo games I would like. Part of that's because I didn't have a Super Nintendo growing up. I had the Sega Genesis. But now, the Super Nintendo is one of my favorite consoles. It just so happens that I started collecting for it when Super Nintendo games became ridiculously expensive. So I've been a little bit hesitant to pick more of those games up, but that's one of the sections that I'm focusing on now, and I hope to be building up that SNES collection soon. But then down beneath that, we've got the N64 collection, all my N64 games with end labels. Nowadays, I notice people don't look back on the N64 as fondly as they once did. A lot of people say it doesn't really hold up, mostly because of the graphics. But I had a lot of fun playing the N64 as a kid. There's also a wild story about how I got my N64, so if you want to hear the wild and crazy adventure of how I got an N64, comment below and I'll do a video just on that. But then down beneath that there, you'll see that there's an overflow of PS1 games. Now that's because PS1 did this weird thing with its cases where anytime they had a game that was more than a single disc, a lot of the times they do these thicker jewel cases, and I love the way they look, but they don't work great for a collection because I've got a nice CD rack for all of my PS1 games, but most of them don't fit because they're in these big, thick jewel cases, so I have to find other places to slot them in. So I've got a lot of really great PS1 games here. I just wish they could be with the rest of the PS1 games. But now we're going to kick it back to Cooper so he can go over the Switch games with you because those are modern enough for his tastes. Damn it, Jimmy, get your fucking game out of here. And here we've got the Nintendo Switch. You wouldn't know it by looking at its graphics, but technically, this is a current gen console. So let's take a look at the games we've got over here. Harvestella, Harvest Moon, but not the real Harvest Moon. Rune Victory 4, Rune Victory 5, Stardew Valley. I know there's a lot of you out there that love the Stardew Valley.
Story of Seasons, Friends of Mineral Town, Story of Seasons, Pioneers of Olive Town. Both great games. As you'll see as we go through this, there's a lot of games that are JRPGs, which I understand to mean that they're Japanese RPGs. Don't know why you have to specify what country they come from. We've got a bunch of those. We've also got a bunch of old games that have been polished up to run on this modern console. Bryzo likes to make me play a lot of those old games, so if I'm going to be forced to play them anyway, I prefer to play them on this version. If I've got to deal with some shit, I'd prefer the polished up shit than the gross, normal, disgusting shit. Okay, moving on.
So I guess I'll be taking back over now because the rest of these are just too old for Cooper. Starting off here, we've got my Nintendo Handheld section. Now, this is an embarrassingly small section considering what I just said. This is all of my Nintendo handhelds. I wasn't all that into handheld gaming until the later half of the 3DS life cycle, really towards the end of the 3DS life cycle. As I became an adult and I had responsibilities and not a lot of time for gaming, I turned to handheld gaming to get my gaming fix. So now I've started to appreciate the handheld stuff a lot more. I only have 2 DS games, but they're 2 great DS games. Chrono Trigger and then Metroid Prime Hunters. Then you get into the 3DS section. There's 2 franchises that make up the bulk of this, that being Legend of Zelda and Harvest Moon / Story of Seasons. Now those are 2 of my favorite game franchises of all time. Cooper and I both love the farming sims, so of course we've got a lot of representation for those on there. I do own a boxed copy of Harvest Moon Friends of Mineral Town, and that is from back in the day. There was the one Game Boy Advance game that I absolutely had to own because I love the Harvest Moon series, so that was one that I saw a reason to get a handheld console for. And then I've got some loose GBA games here. Those are really kiddie games, man. I bought them from a literal child. But 2 sections that I am very proud of are these 2 sections here. That's the GameCube and the Wii. I am not one who focuses on quantity over quality. I collect games that I would genuinely want to play, or games that I have some sort of personal connection with. The reason I'm so proud of these 2 sections is because I've pretty much gotten all of the ones I would want, with some exceptions. You'll notice I have some of the best titles you can own on both of those consoles. There are some glaring omissions, but not many. I'll just quickly highlight some of the standouts here. Baten Kaitos, Eternal Darkness, all 3 Harvest Moons, Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, Lost Kingdom 2 being one of those games I wish I owned, Luigi's Mansion, Metal Gear Solid, The Twin Snakes, Metroid Prime 2, Echo, Paper Mario, Thousand Year Door, Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil Remake, The Simpsons Hit and Run, Spider-Man 1 and 2, Star Fox Adventures, Tales of Symphonia, Ultimate Spider-Man, and WWE Day of Reckoning. WWE Day of Reckoning 2 is another one of those games that I used to own that I wish I owned still. Some highlights here, you've got Cursed Mountain, Fragile Dreams, definite hidden gem on the console, Final Fantasy, Crystal Chronicles, The Crystal Bearers, that's another hidden gem, the Ghostbusters game, Harvest Moon, Animal Parade, and Tree of Tranquility. Those are 2 of the best games to own in the Harvest Moon series. The Last Story, Pandora's Tower, and Xenoblade Chronicles. Back in the day, these were games that did not come out in the North America region. So there was actually a petition you could sign online to get them ported over, and I signed that petition. So when these 3 games came out, of course, I had to pick them all up. With The Last Story, I got that as a collector's edition. I pretty much completed what I would want for the Wii. The one glaring omission, Silent Hill Shattered Memories. I have the PSP version, I don't have the Wii version. And the reason I didn't buy the Wii version is because I had the PSP version, so I kept putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And now that game is insanely expensive.
Yeah, here we've got the Wii U. Yeah, I really shouldn't be talking about this one. This console is 10 years old and it barely lasted 5. But it's technically a last gen console, so I guess I've got to talk about it. Anyway, here's like a couple of games on it I'd waste my time playing. Yeah, there's a Batman game there. Played that, that was good. DuckTales, that one there still saran wrapped. We've got a few other versions. I play that, good game. Oh, and there's a couple of good Zelda games on here. Breath of the Wild, good game. There's another one down here. That's Twilight Princess. This version here, this HD version, yeah, I'd play that. There's a couple of older ones that Bryzo's got. Wouldn't bother playing them. Oh, look at that. And there's a Resident Evil there. Yeah, I'll play that. Other than that, there's just a bunch of old relics. I haven't got much time for them. Clearly nobody else did because the thing barely sold. So let's not waste any more time talking about this thing that nobody wasted their time buying. Let's move on.
So apparently 360 is now also too old for Cooper. So I'll just quickly run you through our Xbox section here. You'll notice we only have original Xbox and Xbox 360, and then there is literally no representation for Xbox after that point. Simply due to the fact that there's no reason for me to buy them when I have a gaming PC and a PS5 and a PS4. If I want to play a multi-platform game on console, I've got a PS4 or a PS5 for that. If I want to play something that's exclusive to Microsoft, I can play it on my gaming PC. But that wasn't true of the original Xbox era or the Xbox 360 era. So I'm still building up these collections because they're great consoles with great games to play. And when it comes to the original Xbox and the 360 really, whenever there was a multi-platform game, oftentimes it looked best on the original Xbox and played best on the original Xbox. That was actually also true of 360 as well because of the weird infrastructure for the PS3. Third-party developers had a hard time making their games run on the PS3. So even though it was better spec-wise, it would oftentimes look better and run smoother on the 360. So a lot of times I'll get multiplats for the 360 over the PS3. So it's not that I have some general hatred for Microsoft or Xbox, it's just Microsoft, in my opinion, shot themselves in the foot with the Xbox One and they haven't really recovered yet. But nevertheless, we've got some great games here on the 360 and on the OG Xbox, but that's our Xbox section here. So moving on. Now over here we've got one of my favorites. This is a super cool little storage unit. All of the 80s and 90s kids out there will instantly recognize one of these guys. What this is it was part of a larger entertainment center. So what this would do is it would house all of the devices that would attach to your TV as part of your larger entertainment system. So this would house things like your VCR or DVD player, CD player, your audio receiver, maybe a record player, a laserdisc player. All of those types of devices would be on these larger shelves here. And then alongside that, you'd have all of your CDs, or in most of our cases, PS1 Dreamcast games. Then over on the side here, it's got these little cubbies. These would be used to store all of your VHS tapes and DVDs later on. So this was actually part of an entertainment center. It wasn't really meant for just storage of media. So for me, it actually serves as both a storage unit and display case. So I have a couple of my favorite games on display here. I love my duck stuff, so of course we've got two of my favorite duck games up top here, that being Maui Mallard and Cold Shadow for the SNES, and Quackshot starring Donald Duck for the Sega Genesis/Mega Drive. Then beneath that, you've got the holy trinity of PS1 Final Fantasies. And beneath that, you'll see we've got a very small, limited Sega Saturn collection. I wasn't really into the Sega Saturn growing up, and by the time I started collecting for it, the games were ridiculously expensive. So if you've got any recommendations for story-driven Sega Saturn games that I should check out, let me know. But I'm limited in what Sega Saturn games I'm going to buy because of the ridiculous price tags associated with these. And then we've got Sega CD games. And of course, if I'm going to get Sega CD games at the prices they're currently at, I'm going to get the two that I would want the most, that being the Echo the Dolphin game. So I've got Echo the Dolphin and Echo the Tides of Time. We played both of those on stream, and we played the Sega CD versions. I actually prefer the Sega CD versions for these. But moving along here, we've got the Sega Master System section. This, similar to the Sega Saturn, I didn't have this growing up, so I don't have a lot of games collected for it yet. If you've got any recommendations, let me know. I'll check those out as well. But again, I'm limited in funds, so as these games get more and more expensive, I'm collecting a whole lot less. But then beneath that, we've got the Sega Genesis collection. You might notice a theme to the Sega Genesis games down here. They don't make any goddamn sense. And that's because most of these were the ones that I owned as a kid. So if you look at it with that logic, these look like games that a child would either get for presents on Christmas or birthdays, or would just think, hey, that game looks cool. Now over here, we've got the Dreamcast section. Now, I love the Dreamcast. We've already played a couple of Dreamcast games on stream. Namely, we played Echo Defender of the Future. Of course, I love my Echo the Dolphin game. But I love story-driven games. I haven't found a lot of those on the Dreamcast. I find most of them to be arcade-type games, and that's not really my jam. So I do love the Dreamcast for games like Shenmue, Echo, Omicron, Resident Evil Code Veronica, Grandia 2, and I own those games, but I'm really big into the story-driven games, and I just haven't found a lot of those on Dreamcast. But moving on down here, we've got most of the PS1 section. As you saw, there's some overflow because we've got those big old jewel cases and I can't fit them all here. We've got a lot of my favorite games. This was my favorite console growing up. You'll get a sense of the type of gamer I am from the games that I have on the PS1 because these tend to be the ones I prioritize. So we've already played a ton of these games on the channel, both on stream as well as part of the Gameplay Fowl sitcom. You'll see we've played games like Blood Omen, Legacy of Kain, Harvest Moon, Back to Nature, Parasite Eve, and of course Oddworld from the pilot episode. Now I could go on and on about the PS1. But we haven't showcased any of these cool collectibles in previous Game Room tours, so I just wanted to take a second and show off all of these really cool collectibles that I have up top here. These are from years and years of just collecting little tidbits, going to different cons, and having a super awesome partner who just knows me so well that she gets me some of the coolest shit. So a lot of this actually came from her, so I wanted to give her a big shout out. And this also showcases a lot of the franchises that I most love, so I wanted to take a moment and just let all of that sink in. So this stuff is dope as hell, but we got a lot more Game Room to cover, so let's kick it on over to the PlayStation wall. Now I'm getting down low here so that I can show you this PlayStation wall. I have the majority of my PlayStation games here, everything except for the PS1, which was in the previous cabinet. But over here, I've got PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, PSP, PS Vita. But it's a little bit hard to show you all of it because most of it's tucked behind this radiator unit here. And I'm pretty sure this doesn't work, but I also never turn it on because of the fact that most of my games are behind it. But this is the PlayStation section. Up top first, we've got the PS Vita. Now what's sad about this is I don't have a lot of Vita physical editions because most of my Vita games are actually PS1 classics. So I do own more than this, and what you'll notice as we go through these is that the ones that I do have are mostly HD remasters of PS2 games. On the other hand, you've got the PSP. Now this is probably my favorite handheld. Earlier I said that I wasn't really into handheld gaming back in the day. That's not including the PSP. The sole reason I chose the Vita over the DS was for one reason and one reason only, and that was this. Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. I loved Final Fantasy VII, obviously, but Zack was always my favorite character, and he got very little attention in the first game. So when he got his own spin-off prequel, I had to have it, and it was exclusive to the PSP. So I bought a PSP specifically to play this. And then there were some other games that came out on PSP that certainly made it worth it. Castlevania Dracula X Chronicles, the Final Fantasy Dissidia games, the fighting games where you fight as Final Fantasy characters. I've got the first one of those. I need to get the second one. The Final Fantasy IV Complete Collection, Final Fantasy Tactics. Of course, I've got the two Grand Theft Auto games, Harvest Moon, Boy and Girl. It's Back to Nature, but it's both versions of the game. Silent Hill Origins and Silent Hill Shattered Memories. But moving on down, we've got the PS2. What more can I say about the PS2 that hasn't already been said? Just quickly, I want to highlight some of my favorite games on the PS2. I love the Dark Cloud series, so I've got Dark Clouds 1 and 2 on there. Of course, I love my Final Fantasy VII. And this game, I think, is criminally underrated. That's Dirge of Cerberus, Final Fantasy VII. This is Vincent's story. This takes place after the events of Advent Children. If any game deserves a remake or a remaster, it's this one. Dragon Quest VIII, Echo the Dolphin, Defender of the Future. We did stream that on channel, but we played the Dreamcast version. Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy X-2, Final Fantasy XII. The Getaway, it's basically British GTA. Speaking of GTA, we have all of those on here. Grand Theft Auto 3, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, got God of War 1 and 2, Harvest Moon, Save the Homeland. Oh, look at that. I've got Kingdom Hearts 1 on PS2, and that's the only one I have because that's the only one that's any good. On the other hand, a series that is consistently good all the way through is this series here, Legacy of Kain. Got Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty. Got all 4 Onimushas. Radiata stories, I've talked about that on stream. Rogue Galaxy, Silent Hill 3, because I love my Silent Hills. And Siren I would put along with that, because that was made by the original Team Silent. Soul Calibur 2, and Tales of the Abyss. We are going on down so we can get to these PS3 games here. 3D Game Heroes. We've got the Batman Arkham games, BioShock Infinite, Demon Souls, Skyrim. I actually waited at the midnight release for that. Grand Theft Auto 5, Enslaved, Eternal Sonata, Heavy Rain, great game. I do actually own more than just the first Kingdom Hearts. I was just joking when I said that earlier. I do genuinely think the first one's the only good one. Last of Us, now that's what a great game looks like. Ni no Kuni, another great game. Red Dead Redemption, Sleeping Dogs, underrated game. Got a couple of Tales games there. Got the Uncharted series, 1, 2, and 3. Now that's it for the PlayStation section, or at least the more retro PlayStation section. Now I'll kick it to Cooper so that he can go over the more modern PlayStation games with you.
Now over here, we've got the only games in the collection worth talking about. The newest ones, the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 5. In my opinion, the only reason to play video games is to kill humanoid creatures, so the better it looks and the better it plays, the better it will be. Thus, newer is always better. Now, PlayStation 4 is going on 10 years old, so it's barely worth talking about, but it's hard to get PlayStation 5s, so I can see a reason why you would still play these relics. Some standouts for me would be games like Bloodborne, Dark Souls, those are great games. Of course you've got Doom. Now there's demons in there, but they look like humans, so it's fun to kill them. Bryzo's recently got me into Final Fantasy VII Remake, so I kind of enjoy that one, at least until a better Final Fantasy comes along. Ghost of Tsushima, killing humans with swords, that's always great. Then there's God of War here, love God of War. This one is not the one that has Odin in it. We do have the one that does have Odin in it, but he's not the real Odin. I've met the real Odin. That bloke in real life is much cooler than the one in this game. Grand Theft Auto, too goddamn old to care about. Then there's this anti-duck propaganda here. That game. Last of Us Part 2. Bryzo loves that one. I get to kill lots of humans in that, so I do love that. Neo and Neo 2. Get to kill some more humans with swords, so that's always great. Couple of Resident Evil remakes. Zombies are close enough to humans, so they're fun to kill. And of course we've got a couple of Wolfenstein games there at the end. If you're going to kill any humans, killing the Nazi humans are the best type of humans you could kill. Then down here on the bottom I'm extremely embarrassed by our PlayStation 5 section. There's barely any games here. For the most modern console I find that to be a travesty. But this is what we've got. We've got Demon Souls and Elden Ring. These are a couple of games I f***ing love. There's the God of War with Odin in it, but not the real Odin, just like a knockoff Odin. Last of Us Part 1. Now, I was never around in your universe when that first one came out, and it looks like by my standards. So this Last of Us, this new Part 1, that's the only one I want to play, and it looks f***ing great, so I love it. Then there's this Resident Evil Village. There's a big scary lady in it with claws and whatnot. I think she drinks blood or something, and the internet seems to be obsessed with her, so I guess I'll point it out, but I don't really have an opinion on the woman. The game looks great though, and that's really my only criteria, so I guess it's good. Then there's Returnal. I played that game for 3 days straight and don't know if I made any progress in it, so it's good. And last up is Spider-Man. It's fun. Don't get to kill many humans, but beating them up's okay, I guess.
So one of the main reasons I decided to do this updated game room tour is because in the last game room tour, I didn't show a single console, which means I didn't even take the time to show you how this console setup works. And there's actually a lot that went into making all of this happen. And I figured there are probably people out there that want to know how they could do something like this for themselves in their game room. So right now, as you can see, I've got the Super Nintendo plugged in, but with just the push of a button, right? I can switch over and we'll go to the Wii. Then I can Go over here, we're on N64. So the way that I've got that running, there's 12 consoles down here. 5 consoles that are running through a composite splitter there. NES, SNES, Sega Genesis, Master System, Saturn. Those 5, I have them all plugged in to a composite splitter that then runs into the CRT. And then there are 4 consoles I have plugged in through S-Video. The N64 that you see here, GameCube, PS1, Dreamcast. Input number 4, our component consoles. The Wii, as you can see here, OG Xbox, PS2. I also have tucked away over here the component cables for the PSP. So if ever I want to play PSP on the TV. One of the cool things about this component splitter is just with the push of this, switch to a different console. So now we're on PS2. Yeah, now we're on Xbox. We've got the Conquer Live and Reloaded going there. But that's one of the things I love about my component consoles here is I don't even have to get up off the couch to change between consoles. So this is my console setup, this cabinet that I'm holding all of these consoles in. I actually built this myself. I actually had some help from my dad. He and I built this together. I basically built a cube organizer, and I realized that after I built it. But there's a reason why I knew I had to build this myself. So one thing I knew I had to do with this is build these 3 at the end here to be slightly bigger than all the rest. 3 consoles out of the 12 are significantly longer than any of the others. On your standard cube organizers, they might not fit. So I was able to build this in a way that the 3 on the end have slightly larger dimensions than the rest. So there was that factor. There was also the aesthetic value that I wanted something that fit the color palette of what I was going for in the game room. That's why I got this nice purple tint in all of the cubbies here. I didn't know how a cube organizer would take paint if I decided I wanted to like custom paint it. And then the final reason is this big ass CRT that I wanted to sit on top of the gaming unit. So if I've got all these consoles plugged into a standard cube organizer, those have limitations in how much weight you can put on top of them. Anybody who's ever tried to move a CRT will know that that wasn't gonna cut it. This is built like a goddamn rock. Like I could have this on top of here and like 2 people could be jumping up and down on this and it ain't gonna collapse. I purposely bought pressurized particle board, I believe is what it was. So it's not just your standard cube organizer. It was specifically built with the intention of retro gaming and specifically retro gaming on CRTs. So real quick, we're just gonna run through all 12 of the consoles that we have set up here, plus the one bonus one we have up top. So first up, we've got the NES. I also have a top loader that you'll see, but the one I have set up here is the original NES, this version here, because it can plug in composite. Next up, we've got the Super Nintendo. I don't like admitting out loud because I was a Sega Genesis kid, but I always wanted the Super Nintendo growing up, so now I have that there. Also got the N64. That is a story that I'll give the cliff notes of here. I stole it. I saw this game. My buddy Jeff had the N64. I saw him playing this and immediately I knew I had to have an N64. So I was able to orchestrate a way to steal one for myself. And that's how I got my N64 with Majora's Mask and with Ocarina of Time. If you're interested in hearing the full story, I promise you it is a wild ride. Comment below and I'll make a separate video for that. But moving along, we've got the Sega Master System. Starting on the next row, we've got the GameCube. Next up is the Wii. We've got the PS1. Still to this day is my favorite console of all time because of the library of RPGs, specifically JRPGs that it had on it. Those are still to this day some of my favorite games, including Final Fantasy VII, which is to this day my favorite game of all time. And then I've got a couple of PS2s there. I've got the fat PS2 and the PS2 Slim. DJ Dano actually gave me the PS2 Slim. It worked when he gave it to me, but something happened along the way and it no longer works. Then you've got the Sega Genesis down there, the Sega Saturn, Dreamcast. Last up, we've got the Xbox. Up top though, you'll see I also have the Mattel Intellivision 2. But anyway, those are all of my retro consoles in the retro console unit that I have set up here so that we can play those. If you've watched gameplay Fowl at all, you've seen them, but now we've had a chance to talk about them in depth. But let's kick it over now to Cooper, who can walk you through all of our modern consoles and the setup we have for those.
Now over here we've got the more modern consoles. Right there we've got that Wii U. Suppose that's modern. Then there's the Switch. And then there we've got the lovely PlayStation 5. And I mean that quite literally. That is a lovely f***ing console. In fact, that's the coolest looking of the consoles you've got in this f***ing modern era. I don't know what's wrong with the people that don't like the design of the PlayStation 5, other than the fact that all you f***ers want is another f***ing console in the shape of a black box. Let's go through the list here. Oh, look at that. Xbox 360, black f***ing box. Wii, black f***ing box. The Switch, even arguably, a black f***ing box. Xbox One, black f***ing box. PlayStation 4, black f***ing box. Xbox One X, black f***ing box. Xbox Series X, black goddamn box. If you don't like the design of the PlayStation 5 because it's not another f***ing black box console, you are goddamn basic. Moving on. Where was I? Oh, right, down here. That's a 360. That is an Xbox 360. That is an Xbox 360. Why is that over here with the modern consoles? Why? Why is that over here with the modern consoles? If you are unaware, the 360 will be 18 years old this year. If you consider the 360 to be a newer console, I hate to break it to you, you are an old person. And then there's the PS3. Old people consoles. They're old. You're old. Moving on.
And there you have it. That's our updated game room. For those of you who are fans of the Gameplay Fowl sitcom, you'll be happy to know that we have new episodes coming soon. The first episode of Season 3 is already filmed. We hope to have that out to you soon. For those of you who are new here, obviously this channel is very weird. We are not by any means your standard YouTube gaming channel. First and foremost, Gameplay Fowl is a sitcom. It's done in the standard 3-camera sitcom style, meant to evoke the feelings of those 90s, early 2000s sitcoms. If you're into that, if you're into retro gaming, consider subscribing to the channel and joining us for this ride as we continue the Gameplay Fowl series. Seasons 1 and 2 are streaming right now, so you can go and check those out. Hopefully I'll have a thing somewhere around here for you to click on so that you can watch both seasons 1 and 2. And then season 3 is well underway. We should have that out within the next, I don't know, soon-ish. The release schedule is pretty consistent. We get new episodes out about every 2 months. But in between seasons, we do these brief hiatuses. So we're just on one of those right now. So season 3 is coming real soon, and then we'll have new episodes every month or every other month until we get through all of season 3, which is turning out to be our best season yet. So if you liked what you got to see with the game room and with Cooper's antics, and you want to see more of that, consider subscribing. I'm sure there's a thing somewhere on the screen, someplace that you can click on to subscribe. But I hope you enjoy the game room, and I hope you join us as we continue to do the Gameplay Fowl sitcom, because it's good. I promise. It's funny at times. Okay, bye.